Hello everyone, and welcome to this fourth RICS World Built Environment Forum European Regional Webinar on energy efficient renovation. Is it a green investment fit for the future? My name is Sander Scheurwater and I have the pleasure of moderating this webinar. The World Built Environment Forum is a global network of people interested in getting information and discussing on the greatest challenges and opportunities in the built environment. So I would invite you to visit our website, rics.org/WBEF, and register there to join the WBEF community. You can also download our app and follow us through various social media channels. So today, in these times of a second COVID wave in many European countries, causing a physical health crisis, mental health crisis, a health sector crisis, and an economic crisis, which are all serious and which must all be dealt with. These are without a doubt very troubling times still. We're not out of the woods yet. But also no doubt in my mind that they will be overcome. And whilst we do, we must not forget that everything we do now and tomorrow is very simple, is still confined by the limits of our planet Earth. Limits that can be bended for a while, as we have been doing in the past decades, but not forever, as at a certain moment they will, without a doubt, break, and then it will be too late. We all know more or less the figures that we have to deal with, such as the need to keep the temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius, and that buildings and building construction are responsible for over a third of the energy consumption and almost 40% of CO2 emissions. And we also know that to lower this, we can not only focus on the relatively easy bit, the new buildings, but we must absolutely address the challenge of existing buildings as well. And this is precisely what the European Commission is doing when they launched the EU renovation wave about 2 weeks ago. Now, obviously, I will not go into detail on that as the European Commission is part of this webinar. But here you can see 3 important quotes that I took from the renovation plan. I think first point shows clearly something we all know as well. Buildings are built to last. And the second one is that renovation can equal job creation. And the third one, I think very important, is that the aim of the renovation wave is to at least, with the emphasis on those words, to double the renovation rate in the next 10 years. So in these worrying times of flattening the curve or crushing the curve, make no mistake, this is the one curve that we actually want to increase, that we need to increase. And to increase it, we need to work together. So we need public sector leadership and engagement, such as the one that is shown by the EU Commission today with the EU renovation plans. We absolutely need private sector solutions, and of course, we need to have the money to make it all happen. So this 1 hour webinar will address all 3 aspects, and I'm hoping that by the end of it, you will understand how it is all connected and what all 3 sectors can do to advance the renovation wave. The starting point of this webinar actually was some excellent work done by RICS in France, where under the leadership of our members, RICS was asked by the French government to propose a renovation strategy. In this photo, if you look at the screen on the left-hand side, you see our previous chairman, Philippe Pelletier, FRICS, and on the right, you see our current chair and speaker on this panel, Franco Vorca, MRICS. They presented their report a few weeks ago to the person in the middle, who is Emmanuel Wargon, a delegate to the French Minister for Ecological Transition, Barbara Pompili. And within her team, Emmanuel is in charge of housing. The 90-page plus report contains no less than 43 proposals, and later on, Frank will be sharing the main points with us. So this brings me to introducing our excellent panel, once again from across Europe, who will address the 3 bubbles that I've just mentioned of the public sector, the private sector, and finance. So I will now first introduce all of them in the order in which they will speak. And I will also like to ask all of them to respond so that we know they are still on the line, a final sound check. So the first 2 speakers will focus on the public sector. We will start with Hadrien Michel, who has been with the European Commission for some time and recently joined DG Energy. Hadrien will share with us the details of the planned EU renovation wave. So welcome, Hadrien.
Thank you, Sander.
Thank you. Second, as mentioned, we have Franco Vorca, member of RICS and our current chair of the RICS Advisory Board in France. So Frank will, as said, talk about the mission RICS in France had on behalf of the government and the recommendations that were produced. Welcome again, Frank.
Thank you very much, Sander. Good afternoon to all of you.
Thank you. The following two speakers both represent the private construction and development sector. First, we have Céline Carré, Head of Public Affairs at Saint-Gobain, a French multinational construction company. And she will take us through what Saint-Gobain is doing to support the renovation wave. Welcome, Céline.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be with you today.
Super. Following Céline, we have Adam Targowski, member of RICS, who is a Sustainnovation Manager and working for Skanska, which is a Swedish multinational construction and development company. Adam himself is based in Warsaw, Poland. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
And the final two speakers, as said, will talk about the finance side of renovation. First, Luca Bertalò, Secretary General of the European Mortgage Federation and European Covered Bonds Council, a full-time Italian and European, but based in Belgium. Welcome, Luca.
Hi, Sander. Delighted to be with you this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, Roger Baumann, member of RICS and COO and Head of Product Development at Zurich Global Real Estate, which is part of the Zurich Insurance Group, Switzerland's largest insurer. Welcome, Roger.
Hi, Sander, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. So just before I hand over to Hadrian, a few practicalities for the nearly 500 people who registered from over 40 countries. You will already have noticed probably that your microphones are muted, but you can ask questions. If you have a question, there should be a question box on the right-hand side of your screen. Please type it there. Try to keep it short and indicate whom your question is for. Time permitting, I will address some of these questions during this hour. If there is no time, we will take note of the questions and we will try to answer them after the webinar through the World Built Environment Forum website. Please stay on until the very end. We will have a poll to ask what you thought of the webinar, so that will always help us in organizing the next ones. And finally, this webinar is being recorded, so a summary article with a recording and the slides will be available on rics.org/WBEF next week. And if you're listening to this, you should receive an email in your inbox when that has happened. So with that out of the way, Hadrian, I would like to hand over to you. Please share with us what the EU's renovation wave is all about.
Many thanks, Sander. Good afternoon, everybody. So let me introduce you briefly what the renovation wave is, although many of you must probably know already some of its main features. But it all starts from the increased ambition, climate ambition of the EU, where we realized from the impact assessment that we conducted that among the three different streams towards these huge greenhouse gas reduction objectives, -55, maybe -16% by 2030. So you have the deployment of renewables, energy efficiency, and decarbonization of technologies, for example. And the main recipient, the main leverage is probably in the near future energy efficiency, which would need to absorb more than 40% of all investment needs during the decade. But unfortunately, the situation currently is we are absolutely not at the stage of fulfilling the objectives. The current renovation rate is more or less stagnating at around 1% per year of the building stock. If we want to achieve our climate targets, we will need to at least double this rate. But it's not only about the doubling of the rate, it's also about the renovation depth. What we call deep renovation, which is ideally more than 60% of energy savings as compared to the original scenario for a building, is something similar to a dead angle so far, because the rate of deep renovation accounts for only 0.2% per year. So the overall objective of the renovation wave is really to put renovation of buildings at the center of priorities and really materialize this energy efficiency first principle and make deep renovation progressively the norm on this market. I will not present the figures because they are appearing, but they come from the climate impact assessment, and those are the targets as compared to the 2015 figures. So bear in mind that these could be provisional depending on whether the ambition is increased or not. Next slide, please. So the renovation wave is built upon a number of intervention areas that are described in the communication. I will not present them in detail, but what I wanted to highlight with this slide is the complexity of the challenges that to be overcome in order to make the renovation wave a success. So it comes at a regulatory aspect, but as said in the first box, but also economic conditions in order to make energy efficiency investments truly bankable, with an easy access and well-targeted funding, and also all the preliminary stages of project development through technical assistance. It also relates to the innovative side of building renovation, not only to introduce new technologies such as smart metering and applications and solutions, but also to have a kind of more forward-looking perspective on what buildings, sustainable buildings in the future could be in terms of modularity, in terms of functionalities, and in terms of the construction materials used. It also covers, of course, the social aspects in order to tackle the energy poverty, which is an issue that is covering more or less 10% of the European population, and it can grow significantly in some member states. And of course, in order to be in line with our environmental targets and objectives, through notably the decarbonization of heating and cooling. And I will jump to the next slide in order to detail a little bit those three focus areas where we put some more detail on what kind of actions could be implemented. And maybe the first one I will start with is the public buildings, because we know that this is somehow a privileged target for immediate public action. Let me remind you that we are putting forward some recovery and resilience plans in order to tackle the effects of the crisis due to the COVID, and this is one of the areas where significant improvements can be done, but also it can be a perfect market segment to test and help the deployment of innovative solutions and ambitious renovations, so to say, the famous deep renovations. I can name, for example, the initiative put forward by your colleagues from DG Environment on levels, which is considering providing a methodology for life cycle analysis at the level of building, which helps us design resource, carbon, and energy efficient buildings from the construction to the demolition phase. Also, of course, the energy poverty, and the worst performing buildings, and the renovation wave is suggesting to launch an affordable housing initiative, which would consist in funding 100 of lighthouse initiatives, and those lighthouse projects to be funded was to be replicated in a bigger scale. So that might be one of the starting elements of the renovation wave in the very next years. And also, of course, the decarbonization of heating and cooling, which currently represents approximately 80% of all energy consumed in buildings. And this is extremely relevant also because in the scope of the European Green Deal, there are some pathways to let's say to extend the European trading system, so the carbon market, to other sectors, to other emitting sectors, including the construction and building sector. So in this perspective, we really need to make sure at the Commission side that we truly align the different directives and legal acts in order to get to this common objective of deep decarbonization. Next slide, please. On the instruments and the financial support now, which is maybe the core of the presentation of today, the first thing that comes out of this slide is that there is a great variety of instruments. And the investments to be prioritized by member states will also vary according to the scope and the time horizon of the various instruments. So maybe in the short term, let's say, direct investment support can be very precious, also because of the magnitude of the instruments put on the table. I'm thinking about this recovery and resilience facility, which will consist of 672 billion euros available in the market, half of them in forms of grants and the other half in forms of other support like loans, for example. And member states are invited to submit their recovery plans by end of April of next year, so pretty soon, and they will have the possibility to indicate which portion of this facility they are intending to use for the renovation of buildings, knowing that at least climate-related investment should represent 37% of the whole envelope. So that's a significant portion of money. Also, the more traditional cohesion policy funds, which were proposed to represent up to 330 billion euros for the next multi-annual period from 2021 to 2027. But also a new instrument, which is the Just Transition Mechanism, which will have several pillars of intervention. But let's say that the first pillar, which is the direct EU money injected into this new mechanism, will represent 15 billion euros and will be directed to the regions that are most affected to the transition to fully clean economy. So it's more on the local level for example, coal-intensive regions, and that might be a useful support for these affected regions as well. But of course, for as much public money you can put on the table to support energy efficiency investments, it will never be enough to match with the investment needs during the decade. So there is a need to leverage and attract private investments, and here fortunately we have some successful examples which we can build upon, such as the former Juncker plan, which will be continued under the name of InvestEU, which will provide a guarantee to investments as submitted by implementing partners such as the European Investment Bank. But also small and innovative instruments that we have developed in the previous period, such as the European Energy Efficiency Fund and the private financing for energy efficiency, which combines a guarantee with some technical assistance for financial intermediaries, which help to increase significantly the leverage of such an instrument. Of course, there is also a need, and I refer back to the first or the second slide I presented. Because of the complexity of market barriers, we need to have specific instruments to try to overcome them, and that's the role, for example, of the LIFE program, which will offer a new window for clean energy and energy efficiency transition for 1 billion euros. and may also redirect part of the circular economy and quality of life window, which will be endowed with 1.3 billion euros. And this is particularly useful in order to identify and tackle specific markets and local market barriers, such as skills, for example, or even think about the asymmetry of information, which has proven to be really a major showstopper in specific areas of energy efficiency. But in the longer run, of course, we will need to rely on innovation, innovative solution in order to standardize and industrialize some solution at the building level. And this is really important for us to get support available from the Research and Innovation Program Horizon Europe, which includes a number of specific private-public partnerships, such as the Build for People on the construction and renovation sector. Also, the technical assistance, which is one of the essential pieces of the puzzle, and we have also here the opportunity to build on a very successful program, which is the Helena facility, which has provided around 300 million euros to the market in the past period, with a respective leverage of more than 30. So it really helps attracting private investors in the market, for example, through the constitution of one-stop shops or the support to third financing or energy service companies. This is now we can turn to the next slide, which is basically recalling in more detail what I've said about some of the most ambitious elements of the plan. But let me maybe just finish with a point on the agenda. There's a lot of things to be done by the Commission on the review of existing legislations. I will not present them all because it's way too much. But maybe one of specific interest is the undergoing revision of stated rules, because stated rules offer some exemptions in the energy sector, which are compiled under the General Block Exemption Regulation and Energy and Environmental Aid Guidelines. These are being reviewed. We hope to have them finalized by our colleagues from DG.com by the end of next year. And our objective is to provide an updated set of rules that can enable the blending solutions and the combination of funds between, according to the origin, either EU, national or local origin, and also the nature. So the combination of grant components with financial instruments, as an example, some preferential loans with a new guarantee, for example, adding up to some technical assistance. So we hope to help in the best way possible their projects all along their life cycle. That's all from my side. I hope I have not been too long. Thanks a lot, and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Adrian. That made the plans a lot clearer to me, and I like how it touches upon all aspects of sustainability and not just the environmental ones, but for example also affordability. And also I think indeed the budget you mentioned, including the opportunities to leverage private investment, are a key aspect and will certainly be of interest to some of our next speakers. So thank you again. Next I would like to move on to Frank. Can you please share with us the recommendations RICS in France has given to the French government on how to best increase their renovation wave?
Thank you very much, Sander. And well, I try to summarize how we started to work and what we put in the report that we have given to the Ministry of Housing, as you mentioned in your presentation, Sander, at the beginning. And we gave this report less than a month ago. The idea behind that, when we get the demand from the Ministry of Housing and the Ministry of environment is, as it was mentioned, the rate of renovation is around 1%. And we know that we need to increase it. So what kind of barriers, what kind of things we could do, and what are the proposals from the industry globally, the real estate sector, and can be helpful for the government to be implemented. So, well, the first thing I want to emphasize is that this work was possible because we have more than 1,400 members in France, and we used all the professional groups together to give us their feedback on their expertise and the capacity to do this report, because we achieved this report, as I mentioned, during the summer and only in less than 3 months. So if we go to the next slide, please. So the idea behind, as I mentioned, is first 1% of renovation. But inside that, we know also that in some places, for example, in cities where you have a lot of activities and in real estate, this renovation rate is getting up to 5%. So we know how to do it. In fact, we know how to do it. It's a matter of attractivity of a city and all the local policy can build a regulatory environment where it's possible to increase this rate. So we work, in fact, with people and cities where the renovation rate is really higher, up to 5%, as I mentioned, because this is where, in fact, we would like to go globally in Europe to achieve such a renovation rate. And I still keep in mind also that when I'm talking about renovation, I have in mind also the greenhouse gas emission that needs to be reduced. So we need to find the compromise between the greenhouse gas from construction, if we demolish and build again, and if we keep a part of the building and we retrofit it. So this is also something we have to get in mind, that we need to increase the real performance of energy consumption, but we also need to be very careful about greenhouse gas emissions. So that's why the first chapter we mentioned is that we need to change the scale of the grid of how to act in the city. Because, well, if you try to do it house by house, or even worse, today in France we have a taxation system that is very good for to do the retrofit flat by flat. But you will never achieve the scale that we would like to achieve, as I mentioned, to have a retrofit rate of 5% of the existing stock. So the first thing is how to go and help the renovation, at least at the level of a neighborhood or maybe a part of a city. And it's also, I will develop that later on, but it's also a matter of how to be cost optimal. Because if you go to the level of a neighborhood, then you can work on the grid, you can work on increasing the quality of services, increasing the possibility of transportation. So it's not only to work on the building by itself, but also on the built environment. And this is our second chapter, which is free up the use and purpose of premises. I think we need to kill the Athena agreement that was done almost 90 years ago, where you had a segregation of activities by the urbanists and the urban plan. At that time, they decided to have really the work in a place when you go to sleep in another place with other housing, where you go to another place of a city where you have commercial activities, and you go to another place of a city for the leisure. So we need to end that, and we see clearly that we are going back to cities where you have a mix of purpose of premises, of use of premises. We see it clearly today where people are talking about co-working, a place to work close to the place they are living. So we are clearly in the hot topic because of the COVID-19 crisis also. But clearly here we see that we need totally to change the paradigm on how we build neighborhood in cities. The third chapter that we have tackled is how to accelerate actions. And here we get a feedback clearly that usually policymakers are mixing together what can be done in the future in terms of innovation and what we need to do today. And well, the work we have done here is to say, if you want to get the industry into this field, you need to define a clear path to 2050, where we know a target in 2050, and from this path about greenhouse gas emission and energy efficiency, what are the targets in 2040, 2030, 2025, and what kind of visibility we can have for the real estate developer, for the industry, also to know which kind of technologies they have to develop in the next 5 years. And then you can work on two different scales that it's very important to not mix at all, because you can't push forward the innovation and think that it will be massified right now. So you have to do something now to improve the quality of renovation in terms of targets that you can set in real performance. And then from that, you can use the innovation to have technology for the next target in 5 to 10 years from now. And then you can have an approach where you know all your stock of existing buildings and housing will increase in terms of energy efficiency, and also, as I mentioned, managing the greenhouse gas, the global greenhouse gas emission. And when we spoke about accelerate action, I also have to mention that we understood that there is a lot of problems in the administrative cost of how to check, how to control what is done in terms of renovation in buildings. So we spend a lot of money, sometimes up to 20% of the cost of the retrofit actions and works. So we spend a lot of money in just checking this administrative costs. So one of the ideas is to say, well, forget about all that and let's go and focus only on real performance. What is the difference between your building today in terms of energy consumption and greenhouse gas emission, and what will be the performance and the consumption after retrofit? And then it's also a way for the reports to say that it's a way to stop subsidize actions only, or just some subsidizing some parts of some components, but really to focus on real performance and real greenhouse gas emissions. And then we said in the last part, support the development of high performance offer. This is what I meant when we need to create the path for innovation. We need first, it was really important to rebuild the attractivity of the construction sector. We need to bring new people, young people, sorry. We need to bring people to this sector because, especially in France, people are getting older. The owners of the SMEs involved in construction and real estate are getting older of 1 year every year. So we know clearly that we need to attract younger people in this field. So how to build this attractivity. And we are thinking that it needs to be a cultural change, thanks to TV shows, as you know very well. That it was done for cooking, with TV shows on kitchens and cooking. So it has totally changed the cultural approach of the chef in the kitchen. So if we could think about something similar, but also we need to change in terms of technology and use the digital approach and what is going to be developed in terms of building information modeling, scan systems, scan to BIM, and use it for the renovation, to help the renovation to be less cost intensive, because clearly the target we have here is that when you work for renovation, the extra costs, if you compare to a new building, can be up to 30%. So what we need to achieve is on the opposite in the next 5 to 10 years to have a retrofit that will cost 30 years a new building. So this is the target we have spoke about in the report. So this is, if you go to the next step, so I will summarize in the next slide. Oops, sorry. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so we have focused on barriers. So I really want to summarize here all what I said on the cost of renovation and also all the taxation, because there is a problem in France. I don't know it is in different other countries, but we have a real huge taxation on renovation. And if you go to the next slide, facilitation, so I already mentioned it. We need really to work on a single renovation scheme, and easy to understand and easy for real estate developer. So really the main let's say focus we have on this report for the Ministry of Housing and for the French government is, if you want to achieve a 5% renovation rate, you need to facilitate the taxation, give back the attractivity to construction and renovation, and act at the neighborhood scale in order to be cost efficient, cost optimal, and act to different fields we can with location, transportation, services, and quality of buildings. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Sandra, and I give you back the word.
Great, thank you, Frank. I mean, that was a good overview of a 90+ page report, and of course, such a short time doesn't do it fully justice. But I think there is a lot in there that is very relevant for other countries as well. And I also noted that your 5% plea being even more ambitious than the quote I had on an early slide on doubling the rate. So actually, what you're saying is we will actually need to quintuple the renovation rate to be successful. So yeah, thank you very much for your contribution. Moving on from the public sector and providing advice to the public sector to the important role of the private sector. So Celine, over to you now to share with us your thoughts and solutions Saint-Gobain is offering to ensure that today's buildings become fit for the future.
Yeah, thank you very much. You hear me well, I guess. I'm very happy to be here with you today, because it's very exciting months with the publication of the renovation wave, and especially today because we had the Renovate Europe Day with Vice President of the Commission, Timmermans. What I would like to do in those 7 minutes is to bring the perspective of Saint-Gobain on energy efficiency and what we do. So we are a global player. We're providing solutions in a number of construction market segments in new build and renovation. If you can move to the next slide, please. Yes, and you can click once. Yes, so this is a graph that gives illustrates the breakdown of effort that needs to be done at global scale to decarbonize the building sector. You can see here something which is probably familiar to you, which is the combination of energy demand reduction both on new build and on renovation, and the increase of decarbonized supply, and be combined with action on embodied carbon to make the full journey. And if you click once, this is giving you the idea about the challenge in Europe, where, as we heard, the focus should be on the renovation due to the figures that we know, and that 80% of the buildings that stand today will still be with us in 2050. So we were talking about doubling or multiplying by 5. I take that actually we need to multiply by 10 the share of renovation that stands today at 4.2% per year, if we want to be on track for 2030 and 2050. The effort should be indeed put on the worst performing buildings. We have today around 35 million people who cannot afford heating in the winter. And on policies, without getting into the details, my only take on that is to say that they need to come as a package. And it is our role together with policymakers and all stakeholders to develop this recipe. We're talking about kitchen health. I think this is here the essence. We need to get it right so that the policies combining support, finance and regulation enable to improve the quality, the performance, the lifestyles of occupants without forgetting the whole life cycle dimension. In terms of solution, you can pick one. So this is just to give you a snapshot of some of our solutions in insulation. For example, this was in Paris, the renovation of a former station called Fraissinet Hall, that is today welcoming over 1,000 startups, where we use insulation solution for a roof that was 25,000 square meters. You see here also some example of glass that is there to provide high light transmission together with reduction of overheating and reduction of heat loss. So this combination is very important. What you see, the two other pictures are showing how we combine solutions with our different products within Saint-Gobain. So you see here example is in interior wall insulation as well as exterior wall insulation with facade F4, and this is both combining gypsum-based and glass wool solution in a way that is making the installation easier to use. It's increasing productivity and also the resisting dimension. If you click to the next, we also like to focus on occupants, because all of this needs to be made for people. And you see here example of what we call a multi-comfort house in Saint-Gobain, which is about maximizing in concrete terms the 4 dimensions of health and comfort, be it for thermal, indoor air quality, visual and acoustics. And we do it for both new and renovation. The examples that you see here were also part of a testing phase for the levels framework that was just mentioned by Adrien earlier, which is the EU sustainability framework. So we like to improve dimension and improve comfort dimension, and as well as a sustainability dimension all together. If you click, we also engage and commit. You see here a number of partners we are working with at global and European level. We also do that at French level. For example, our CEO was tasked to co-lead a French task force to support renovation as a pillar of the recovery. And we also commit, we committed last year to be net zero by 2050, which calls for huge work internally, where we analyze where our process can improve, be less carbon intensive, but also our products. So developing lightweight products, increasing recycled content, and rethinking formulation on our agenda. In the next slide, I'd like to share a few thoughts regarding the renovation wave and how we can accelerate. And I will share on policy and on what we can do at Saint-Gobain. So on policy, if you click, this is a box about the renovation roadmaps. Things have improved, and EU countries have now developed their roadmaps, or at least should be on track to have them. But what we see still too much is that we have bits and pieces of the puzzle that should become planning tools that would be a better storytelling for finance to get on board. So we need clearer targets. We need approaches which are clarified by segments, because this is all very different if you renovate schools or if you renovate single family houses. And the two small pictures here show that we need to improve the interaction between those long-term renovation strategies. It's a recent study by the Building Performance Institute to understand how they can better support the recovery plans that would fill into the EU can benefit from the EU budget. We are not completely there, and work is needed in the next months. If you click, the other important dimension for us is regulation. What you can see here on this map, without being exhaustive, is the countries in the world that already have minimum energy performance standards, be it at city, regional, or national level. And we believe that this is a dynamic that needs to be further deployed, and that could become as powerful as the dynamics that led to deployment of NZEB, near zero energy buildings in Europe. The question today is how to get it right. Those standards exist in various segments for commercial buildings, for private rented sector, for example, in the UK. But we need to get the right financing and taxation to encourage them. If you click, I want to illustrate what we do, what we can do to support the renovation wave acceleration. So here, this is an example of a renovation of a private school a few years ago in Italy, where we took advantage of the school being closed due to anti-seismic measure to do a fully fledged renovation, bringing the building from class G to class A2 in terms of energy efficiency, but also the acoustics were improved, because it's very important for learning conditions. And it was also working on the indoor air quality and on the lighting. Another example is our Kandu startup, which was started in 2016, where we bring together our knowledge and expertise in building physics, in building design, in sociology, and also in data management. We improve all along the comfort dimension in working areas. It can be in offices, but also in restaurants, or also healthcare or commercial buildings. And this can also lead to the renovation, obviously. And to click last block to finish, this is just to illustrate also how we engage in Saint-Gobain to support France Relance. This is not exhaustive because we are present all over Europe. But obviously we originated in France, and this is also where we have a lot of examples, and where we can, for example, train. We decided to train professionals that get qualifications up to 10,000 by 2022. We will definitely also boost our offer in all the segments. We will boost our offer, combining our different solutions together, without forgetting biosourced material as well. And we are also working with greater awareness tools and accompaniment for homeowner. Not least, we're encouraging employees to volunteer and to put their knowledge and expertise at the service of the energy transition as part of France Relance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Celine. I feel I've entered into some sort of a bidding contest where we went from the first speaker doubling to, multiplying by 5 to now multiplying by 10. I think whatever the figure is, the message is clear. Renovation needs to be increased by a lot, and we've heard a lot of good ideas already. And there's a lot to say about it. We're halfway through the speakers. We're more than halfway through the time scheduled for this webinar. I just want to tell everybody that we will let all the speakers share their incredible stories. So it's likely we will go a bit over time. I'm conscious that not everybody will be able to stay then until the very end. But as said, this session will be recorded. So if you have to leave on the hour, then of course you can listen to the end once the recording has been published. So thank you again, Celine. I would now like to move to Adam. Adam, please share Skanska's perspectives on retrofitting and the renovation wave.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. If you can move to the next slide, I think it's very important not to forget in all these discussions about the retrofitting or renovation, what's actually the purpose of the building. We are the company that is a general contractor, so we build a lot of different buildings, infrastructure, but in the same time we're the company that is developer of office premises, office buildings, and residential premises. So I'd like to raise here the element of the purpose of the buildings, meaning that the energy consumption is the result of having buildings and of buildings serving its purpose. So I want to say here that we cannot forget about this primary function of the building. So ensuring the indoor climate and proper conditions for people to rest at home and to work at the office. So that's the angle that is very often forgotten, and especially nowadays in the COVID time, these elements related to typically called the comfort or well-being are now related to safe and to ability to use properties, to use buildings in a safe way. If we can get to the next slide. Another thing I'd like to raise is the climate approach. So the climate targets that I believe might help very much. So as we know, it's becoming more and more common among cities, among countries, among companies, corporates that climate targets are announced. Skanska has announced its climate target to be climate neutral by 2045 and to limit climate impact, so the carbon emission by 50% by 2030. And why I'm saying this, it is because the climate target is again not only the operational emissions but also embodied carbon. So we saw in the previous presentation that actually it's not only about the renovation, meaning the reduction of the operational carbon, but we need to bear in mind also the embodied carbon, so carbon related to the materials. And if we can get to the next slide, I want to say three things now. First of all, it is very often difficult to limit operational carbon footprint, so to increase the energy efficiency, in the same time maintaining the proper indoor environment, or even in many cases improving it, because as we know, all the buildings are not meeting current requirements when it comes to indoor climate. So that's very important thing that very often we cannot just look at the energy efficiency and forget about the quality of indoor environment. Another thing very important is when it comes to scale. We've heard Frank mentioning that the scale of if we maintain the house per house or flat by flat scale, it's not going to happen that we will reach the targets. So that's the first reason. It's going to be very difficult to with this pace to reach the target. Another thing, another challenge related to this approach is that actually it limits very much the access to bigger players, to players with the expertise, to players who can bring innovations to this so-called renovation sector. Typically in Central Europe, I can say that the renovation sector is represented by the companies doing thermal insulation, so putting either styrofoam or mineral wool on the walls. And another part is related to installation or implementation of thermostatic valves or some simple heating system improvements. So basically, bearing in mind that it is quite complex process to increase the energy efficiency and to limit and to maintain indoor environment, that requires a lot more knowledge, and the scale is needed to bring this knowledge to the table and to maintain proper pace. And third, last but not least, what you can see in this slide are two examples of projects executed last years in Poland. So one of the Central European countries. Upper ones is the renovation that took place in Wrocław. That is the building built in 17th century and recently renovated making it premium A+ class office building. And the building, so that's the building that has its that it represents kind of heritage. And on the lower side part of the slide, you can see this red building that used to be built something around 30 years ago. And in Central Europe, as we know, there was a period when there was a huge demand for office space, for residential space. So a lot of buildings have been constructed in a hurry, not necessarily bearing in mind the requirements and its efficiency in many meanings. So I'm showing these pictures to say that it's not always worth to renovate for the sake of renovation, because bottom right picture is the building that has been built instead of this red one. So that's the one that is offering currently also office premises. So as it used to be, consumes a lot less energy and provides premium indoor climate. So I mentioned the climate target that is covering both operational and embodied. I believe that we should bear in mind not only one-to-one renovation approach, but broader perspective, bringing expertise to the table and allowing innovation to come with the players that can bring it to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Very interesting and also very good angle on how you link the importance of renovation back to the actual focus of buildings, which is the people. Also a very ambitious target of the 50% by 2030. And I think a point very well made on the need to include embodied carbon in all this measurement next to the operational carbon, which has been a challenge so far, but something we undoubtedly need to tackle. So now I would like to move on to our final two speakers who will look at the important angle of financing the renovation wave. First, the perspective from the lenders. So Luca, I have had the pleasure of following the EMF's energy efficient mortgage initiative from close, and RICS was of course very pleased to play a very small role in the initiative from a valuation viewpoint. But my pleasure and the one of RICS aside, I have the challenge of explaining this hugely important and up until now successful initiative in the next, let's say, 5 to 7 minutes, and also how this initiative can provide a vital support to the EU's renovation strategy.
Thank you, Sander, and we are very delighted to be part of this event, and we would like to thank all the members of RICS and all the valuers for the strong support in our initiative. We share the same challenge, which is designing a completely new ecosystem. I think that in this unprecedented crisis, I think it's even more important that we join forces and we try to design a new business model. We know that the challenge that we have in front of our eyes, and I don't know if we can put the first slide, is immense. Allow me to play the game of the numbers, but I mean, if we look only to the residential side, we see that in Europe, more than 220 dwellings, residential dwellings, needs to be renovated in the coming years. So 35 million of the renovation strategy is just a drop in an immense need of a renovation. This immense need of a renovation is a fantastic opportunity for all of us to redesign a new Europe, clearly oriented to energy efficiency and to reach the neutrality by 2050. Which is, I think, something that can be reached only if all the different industrial sectors, they work hand in hand under the guidelines of the European institutions, which are clearly committed to this new strategy. And they are acting also as a global benchmark, because if we look in our membership, we are acting as a benchmark not only for European members, but also for Brazilians, for Americans, for Canadians, for Australians, and Asian stakeholders. We try to put on the table of the discussion very concrete result. We believe that the revolution will start in a place where most of us are in this moment, at home. We believe that this crisis will increase the value of our houses, and will increase the value for consumers to improve the quality of their houses. This is the starting point of the revolution, convincing every single consumer that their house is the best investment that they can do. And we, as a financial sector, we are the facilitators. We should remove barriers and allow people to have access to credit when they decide to make an investment in their house. This is our role. We believe that an energy efficiency mortgage designed at the European scale can be a catalyst for this revolution and can really help every consumer to improve the quality of their house and most probably improving the future of their kids. What is the challenge? I think that the financial sector has a huge responsibility to integrate the energy renovation wave in reality and bring this in the house of every single citizen. When you need money, you usually go to the bank, and the bank should be ready to offer you the right product. And we are very delighted to inform you that, I mean, more than 66 banks are ready to put in production line energy efficiency mortgages. We will be announced very soon an energy efficiency mortgage label, which will guide consumers, lenders, and investors on a greener future. Most of our banks are already testing with clients the green products, because we believe that the mortgage is simply the most convenient way to renovate your house. We are also testing the energy efficiency mortgage label in sandbox. So we have selected a few areas in Europe where we can test the capacity of stakeholders to work together. Because we believe then the bank can only facilitate the access to credit, but then we need an ecosystem following us and guiding us towards greener solutions. So we really ask for the support of the entire community. We need valuers, we need SME, we need material producers to help us in building a new business line, a new business value chain that can really help Europe to get out from this crisis. Well, what we would like to try to build, Sander, is really a green renaissance. And I think that if we think of what was the Renaissance, it will be impossible to think the Renaissance without the bankers in Florence or Lorenzo il Magnifico, who was a Medici, a banker at the end of the day. So finance has the responsibility to bring solutions. We feel this responsibility, and we are working very hard to bring the bank the closest to you, the solution for you, and to make convenient, to make your retrofitting more viable and more important for the future of your life. With this, I would like to conclude, Sander, and I would like to thank all the people who have been so successfully involved in our initiative. And thank you very much to Rix for the kind support. I give you back the floor. Thank you all.
Thank you, Luca. I remain very impressed about what you and your colleagues have done in the past 2 years in this field. It's an example for me where success requires the right combination of, as you expressed very well, having a clear idea and showing leadership, but also convincing not only your own members, but also being inclusive and finding the right partners to develop this with. And we've seen examples from previous speakers as well on how cooperation, how we can only be successful if we cooperate across the sector. So finally, Roger, after the lenders, I think the same would count for investors. So over to you now to share how Zurich Investment Management and the wider investment community can support the renovation wave.
Thank you very much, Thunder, and thank you very much for the introduction. And I'm pretty sure that only together we can manage this crisis ahead of us. And that's why I will focus more on what we're doing in our asset owner alliance and not, going into details concerning the renovation wave. But for me, it's clear that insurers, are exposed to climate change related risk from multiple angles, both in their underwriting, and what I want to talk about is their investment activities, where real estate plays a crucial role, as we have heard from the other speakers. So who is Zurich Investment Management? That's on the first slide. And how are we including these risks in our investment strategy? We are around 650 people in 31 countries, investing from our global balance sheets, unit-linked businesses, and also for third-party institutions. And from the balance sheet, just to give you a number, around $19 billion are invested in direct real estate in the Americas, Europe, and Asia. And we are a typical long-term core investor who only invests in stable and transparent markets. The sector allocation is dominated by office and, particularly in Switzerland, residential, and has proven to be very resilient during the crisis that we face this year. We have a strong home bias, but increased investments in Europe, and therefore the renovation wave and the regulation tsunami coming from the EU also has an impact on our portfolios. And we also expand our footprint in the US. Next slide, please. So what is remarkable is that Zurich has committed to two independent but partly overlapping initiatives. In June 2019, as the first insurance company, Zurich signed up to the Business Ambition 1.5-degree pledge. As part of Zurich's pledge, it has also updated its position on some of the most carbon-intense fossil fuels investments. Second, we are founding member of the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance I mentioned before, committing to align our investment portfolios, and I'm not talking only about the real estate, within a 1.5-degree scenario. And what that means, the 1.5-degree scenario is on the next slide. The pledge that we signed, and over 275, I think, other companies, aims at limiting average global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees, as the name says it, in line with the Paris Agreement to limit the worst impacts of climate change. And what 1.5 degree means is actually decoupling economic growth from greenhouse gas emissions fast enough to not overspend the world's remaining carbon budget. Second, flattening the curve, peak year-on-year increase of greenhouse gas emission measured in carbon equivalent as soon as possible. And we know it's almost too late to stay in line with the 1.5 degree target. And then third, take net greenhouse gas emissions to zero by 2050, take net emissions below zero after 2050. And this basically means halving today's emissions every decade until 2050. So Zurich pledged to climate neutral portfolios. After having been the first insurer to sign the UN Global Impact Business Ambition for the 1.5 degree pledge, we joined as a founding member the Asset Owner Alliance, which is, from my point of view, a very important step in transitioning towards a low carbon economy. The UN convened Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance actually is a young alliance. It was launched in September 2019 at the UN Secretary General's Climate Summit, and is an ambitious climate leadership group. In 2020, the alliance grew. It grew up to 30 institutional investors managing over $5 trillion US dollars assets under management. And it follows practical tracks of work include how to monitor, report, and verify data and your targets. We engage with asset managers and corporates, and the initiative is also supported by Mission 2020 and WWF, who provide strategic advice to the alliance. So now you can ask me whether we are doing enough or not, and I think we are not doing enough. And I just give you an example. In our Swiss portfolio, the Swiss portfolio with around 9 billion is one of our major investments that we have in Europe. Actually, if we look at our decarbonization pathway, we are on track to reach our 2020 goal. But this is not enough to reach net zero by 2050, or even better, even earlier. The renovation rate is actually too low, and we need to at least double it to reach the Swiss government's targets, which are somehow aligned with the EU. But building retrofits alone will not be sufficient. So the strategy also has to include switching to low carbon heating system, which is not an easy undertaking, as we all know. The biggest challenge in the portfolio is to reduce our Scope 1 emissions that are mostly fossil based by increasing the share of renewables in the Swiss portfolio. We still have 150 properties with oil heating, whereas most of them are 20 years or older, and 200 properties are gas-based. For oil heating, the only solution is switching to local heat pumps or connecting to suitable district heating networks. As for gas, the option, if possible, switching to biogas, or even, if available, synthetic fuel gas. These are also options we are thinking about. Currently, within the Alliance, we are defining the target setting guidelines and work in parallel with our teams to estimate the necessary CapEx investments to reach net zero by 2050. So the renovation wave will certainly drive the agenda for investments in retrofits and help investors implementing their net zero strategies. But I think we as an industry still need to better understand the transition risks that come with the new regulations, that come with the new wave, and we have to know and to learn how to build more resilient investment portfolios. That's it from my side. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you, Roger. And I like how also in your presentation, you focus on the need to show leadership and commitment on the one hand, but also to work together to achieve these very ambitious ambitions. I think both the business ambition for 1.5 degrees Celsius as well as the UN Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance, they sound very important to help advance the needed renovation wave. So this nearly concludes the webinar. Yeah, we have heard from the public sector, the private sector, and the finance sector. Many different numbers. We can't even agree on whether the temperature rise should be limited to 1.5 or 2. But I hope what you've taken away, everybody's listening, that it's not about the numbers. It's about, as Lucas said, creating a new Renaissance, a new Europe. Irrespective of the numbers game, renovating is essential. Scaling up is essential, and cooperating across sectors is probably the most essential one of all. Roger said it at the end, we are not yet doing enough, but we have all the ideas, and we will get there and start doing more if we all focus on it. As you've heard, all 3 sectors are vital in ensuring we increase the renovation curve to ensure that buildings have less of an impact on the Earth's climate, and to do so not only in an environmentally sustainable way, but also in a way that is affordable and makes business sense. The 3 Ps of people, planet, and profit. So if you like this webinar and you would like to see what else the World Built Environment Forum has to offer, I would also like to invite you to download the World Built Environment Forum app from the App Store or Google Play, so you can access the latest innovative global thought leadership. On this app, you can also find our excellent series of podcasts. We're all going to continue to work from home, and we know it's important that we all take regular breaks, we get away from our desks, and we need to exercise. So, why not stimulate your mind at the same time as you stimulate your body by listening to these. And finally, I would just like to point out our next regional European World Built Environment Forum webinar will take place next year on the 26th of January. A bit too early to wish you a happy Christmas just yet, but it will be then. It will also be the start of our 2021 European World Built Environment Forum webinar series, which will focus on sustainability and finance in its various shapes and forms. So the first one will focus on, as you can see here, ESG in real estate and construction. And I invite you to already sign up. In fact, if you would go to our WBEF Twitter feed right now, the top tweet should be the link where you can register your interest to join this one. So this concludes our webinar. Thank you for listening for more than 1 hour. A few of your questions will be addressed post-webinar, and I hope you found it very worthwhile. And a big thank you to the speakers as well.